Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, here I am, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show for the last day of this year, 2024. It has been a wild and interesting year. So many unexpected little turns. So much to reflect on. And yet, we're right in the middle of the week. So what the heck? Tomorrow's a holy day of obligation for all of you Catholics out there, so make sure you have figured out whether you're going to Mass tonight or tomorrow. My wife just reminded me of that, so I'm letting you know. I got to start today in a really special way. I got to start it by walking down just before the program and having all four of my children, who are now all ambulatory, come running up in succession and give me hugs. And I'm able to do that because of you, the audience, who continue to watch, to share the program, who are subscribers over on Locals and so on and so forth. The folks that have really carried this to the end. So at this time, at this moment where we're doing this, I'm eternally grateful. I really am, because this has just been such an interesting 2 years. Really unexpected, a turn of events. I went from being a guy who didn't know how I was going to feed my family, who was looking down the barrel of fighting a massive enemy of the federal government. And it really is. It's huge. It's unwieldy. Donald Trump is about to take on the single biggest burden that any man can take on in this country, in this world. And so we were looking down the barrel of this evil, really, truly evil stuff that the Biden administration was throwing down the way at us. And it was tough. It became tough. And it got better because of you all, because of our listeners. So thank you for what you do in sharing. Thank you for being part of our community in the morning on Locals. For all of you that get up and take a look and see what's going on with the show, there you are every morning. Thank our chat moderators, folks like Rose Lopez and Eric Jason, who get up there and share what's happening, share the advertisers, all of that. Just want to say thank you, a big way. And I mean it, because having a little 18-month-old come toddling up to me with the little curls in the back of her hair and wrapping me up because she saw the other three do it, that's something I couldn't do in almost any other job. And I've worked other jobs. I used to go and jump in my car and drive into the government buildings and, go into DC and all that. And it was a different animal. And it's not the same as being able to watch them have breakfast and see my wife in the morning and kiss her 10 seconds before I go to start work. And being able to hang out with them just a little bit, even if it's not a ton. It means a lot. So thank you for all of that. Thank of all of you. I know everyone's kind of doing these retrospectives. That's my retrospective. I've got a little bit today that I want to talk about that's not that personal. It's this observation that I had that we're coming to the tail end of Biden's administration. And it was a disastrous administration. It was a really ugly thing for this country. It was personally incredibly difficult for us to go through it, because I watched them do something that they had no business doing. I watched the hypocrisy we experienced it in our family. Many of you did as well, whether it was from COVID mandates in the private sector or in the government sector. You saw something coming for you that was decidedly un-American. And it was coming under the guise of my democracy, our democracy. And if we recall, when Joe Biden stepped into the office, the thing that he said he wanted to be, transitional or transformational, it's hard to say what he was talking about because he probably didn't know either. Got a little retrospective on that as well. But he wanted to be something like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who might have been the worst thing that ever happened to this country. And if we're being honest, and if you guys have followed this program for any period of time, you know that the reflection I have on FDR is that he was the closest thing that America ever got to a dictator. He was the exact opposite of the first president of the United States. George Washington, the people came to him and said, we want to make you a king, because that's what they knew. They knew kings. And Washington was transformational, not just for America, but for the world, to say that people have offered me power and I will walk away from it. And whether Washington meant it in a Christian way or not, it had a paradigm shift on the world and had a paradigm shift on this country and the way that we looked at the way that we wanted to be governed. We became a republic that was governed with some democratic principles, but with fail-safes to keep us from the tyranny of the majority. And FDR did the opposite of that. He continued to run for office. He didn't follow the precedent of those who came before him and walk away from power. He died in office in his 4th term. They had to change the Constitution because he was the one guy that showed, I have so much hubris and pride that I have to run everything forever, and died doing so. And that was who Joe Biden aspired to be. And what's amusing, I think, is that what we constantly find in this world is that when men make plans, particularly diabolical plans, God laughs. He laughs at our plans too, certainly my plans. Most of you probably experienced something of like, you had an idea, you thought you were going somewhere, you started a career, you wanted to do something, you laid out all of this roadmap, this trip that you were going to go take, and it didn't work. You ended up somewhere, you had car troubles the day you got out of the driveway, kind of thing. Most of us have had that experience of maybe not God laughing at us, but having other plans and us having to realize that although we can make all the plans we want, once things get started, it's up in the air and we have no ability to continue to affect it. That's been my experience. And that was Joe Biden's experience. A man who claims to be a Catholic, who claims to be something that I think most of us have looked at him and seen that he is not. He's claimed to be a man of the people, but he's been an elitist. He's claimed to be a servant, but he has served himself. And he wanted to be a transformational FDR, and he ended up Jimmy Carter. And that is today's thumbnail. Joe Biden peering on, seeing the two people that he could have been, hoping to be FDR, and ending up the one thing he probably hoped he would never be, which is Jimmy Carter. And I'm going to make the argument to you today that the media's fawning over Jimmy Carter, which is happening at this moment right now. I have a half dozen articles or so from various different places from across the pond and from domestic saying how Jimmy Carter really wasn't that bad, how the struggles of the Biden administration are very similar. They are seeing a one-to-one analogy. And the reason why the media, we like to do meta-analysis here, the media has to carry water for Jimmy Carter, who just died at 100 years old. They have to do it because they carried water for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden should have never been in that position in the first place. They are trying to whitewash Jimmy Carter, and by proxy, they are covering for what will eventually be the reputation of Joe Biden, who may have supplanted him as the worst president in modern memory. That's what I'm going to take for today. That's where we're going to go. I know that is a long-winded way to get into it, but I think in this moment of reflection as we go into the new year, that's where I wanted to start. All right. I also want to say thanks to the folks, not just you, but also the sponsors that continue to sign up to support us, that agree to be involved with us financially. It's a big deal to me that they are able to do this. It's the other half, the fact that you folks know that I'm only going to pick sponsors that I believe in, and I'm not going to bring on anybody that I wouldn't spend my own money on. And many of you spend your money over here. So let's go ahead and say thanks to the folks over at Blackout Coffee for starters. Okay. Let me just tell you about the company that is shaking up the coffee world. They are Blackout Coffee. In fact, you all introduced me to them. This isn't your typical run-of-the-mill brew from a corporate giant that doesn't share your values. Blackout Coffee is bold. It's unapologetic. Truly America first. We might even work on them on being America only. This month, Blackout Coffee, this is the last day of it that I know for sure, 20% off. Blackout Coffee is making it easier than ever. You can give a gift or you can give yourself a gift. If you didn't get the gift you needed, amazing coffee, cocoa, tea, and more. That's right, because Blackout Coffee is running sales all the way through the end of December, which is today. Whether it's a bag of premium roasted coffee or delicious hot cocoa, a box of specialty teas, you can find something perfect for everybody on your list or yourself if you didn't get the thing you need. And you can use coffee or hot cocoa every single day, especially if you guys are living up north. It's really warm here. We don't have much of that, but I need coffee every day. Let's not forget the gear. They've got mugs and shirts and more designed to make a statement, because enjoying great coffee should look as good as it tastes. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/Kyle. You guys see it on the screen right now. blackoutcoffee.com/Kyle. You can stock up for the new year. You can grab a gift if you didn't get something you wanted. You can support a company that stands for what you believe in, serves up quality that you can taste. It is blackoutcoffee.com/Kyle. Save that 20%. Let's dive into this last episode of the year. So here's where we're going to go. I had this moment last night as I was looking into the bird flu thing, because I'm just not done with it. And I don't think you guys should be either, because they're obviously not done with it. And I found this very troubling, but very, very academic looking man over on CNN's website, and a video to go along with it, which I will share. Here he is. He's a CDC scientist, and he responds to Dr. Birx raising the alarm over handling of bird flu. If you remember yesterday, we played you some video of Dr. Birx, the scarf-wearing aficionado from the Trump administration, who stood up and said, COVID is coming after you, and we should have learned more lessons, but we didn't. And so this man, he is the director for the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the CDC, talking about the former White House coronavirus response coordinator, Deborah Birx, talking about how the United States is currently, right now, making all of the same mistakes that were made during COVID. Is that so? Because we could take that a couple ways. And if you follow this program, if you're part of the little community of people that want to think for themselves, perhaps you're thinking, well, that means they're probably going to march out a shot that I don't want. They're going to make some mandated behaviors that I'm going to disagree to. Who is this guy? I knew I recognized his face, and many of you probably do too, but you probably didn't know it until I play his voice corresponding with. So here's a little clip from CNN talking. It's Deborah Birx up front. She's saying her little bit. Then the response. The host talks far too long, I think. But we're going to get into this man, Dr. Daskalakis. Does that sound familiar to you? It should.
We're not testing enough, and we know from other viruses that a lot of the spread can be asymptomatic. So we're kind of have our head in the sand about how widespread this is from the zoonotic standpoint, from the animal to human standpoint. I flash back to January of 2020, and I'm hearing the same words come out of the CDC.
Like what?
Low risk human to human transmission.
Now,
our agencies are making the same mistakes they made with COVID.
Joining us now is the director of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, those are some strong words there from Dr. Birx. What is your response to her comments about the need for more testing of the bird flu?
So first, thank you so much for having me on. Happy New Year, everybody. So I'll start by saying a really important point, which is flu is not COVID. I think COVID, as an example, was a virus that we'd never encountered. Flu is one that we've been preparing for decades, and bird flu specifically, we've been preparing for over 2 decades. So quite notably, we have been doing a lot of surveillance and testing of influenza, especially since March. So our routine influenza system, that is what we use every year to figure out what the best vaccine is and what the best strategies are for flu, has in fact tested 73,000 people to look for bird flu, and has actually found 3 individuals through that system. So along with the work that we do in our regular surveillance, testing tens of thousands of people since March, we also also have been engaging with farm workers and farm worker health organizations to make sure that individuals with exposures are tested. So,
okay, let's just break away from that because he doesn't say anything important. I only noticed one of you in our chat who are really on it most days. Recognize Dimitri Daskalakis, the monkeypox coordinator, accused of Satanism because of his pentagram tattoos, his fondness for BDSM clothing and leather under his suit. Yeah, that guy. The People's Voice referred to him as potentially a full-fledged Satanist. He was the deputy national coordinator for the Mpox, also known as monkeypox, before it was too racist to say monkeypox. He was the director of the division of the HIV prevention at the Center for Disease Control. Yeah, the guy that took pictures with bondage gear and fetish underneath his clothing. All kinds of little fetish costumes. That guy. He's back. Apparently now he's in charge of the thing that, like, I think Fauci used to do. The National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. This guy gets around in more ways than one, I suppose. How interesting. Is there only really one satanic BDSM gay doctor that they can pull out of the works to join? This is a microcosm for the Biden administration. We talked about Leana Wen yesterday, who seems to have been everywhere and has a lot of high-held beliefs. At least this guy's 10 years older. He's 51. So at 51, I suppose you could have a number of these types of positions of authority. But it is pretty amazing that they keep trotting out the same people. And for whatever reason, CNN, who is like alternately deciding we're going to be semi-reputable and bring on people that say intelligent things, and we're also going to bring on like complete deep state mouthpieces that are going to just parrot the regime's talking points. It's kind of wild. And this one is certainly one of those wild bits of it. I don't know any other way around it. In any case, Dimitri Daskalakis, a name that I expect will probably not be relevant in the Trump administration. If I had to guess, Donald Trump's made some bad hiring decisions. I was the victim of one of them, knowing that Chris Wray, this sort of empty suit that took over the FBI, he was certainly at the top of the list for most of us. I don't think he's ever made one of these type of decisions. I stand ready to be corrected if you have one. But guys who run around shirtless with satanic tattoos, pretty special. In any case, found it interesting that his name has just popped up again. And here he is trying to dodge talking points about Satanism while he was just trying to do his job of helping people avoid monkeypox, which was a really, really big deal. If you remember, monkeypox, a disease that only affects basically men who have sex with men, which is not gay men. I found that out today, too. Some of you guys, if you want to go find out how weirdly things have gone awry in 2024, simply go to Wikipedia. And I know it's not a good source of information, but it's an interesting source, right? It's the same reason I go to CNN's webpage every morning. It's not because I think that they're giving me great information. Oftentimes, they're giving me something very different. They're giving me a narrative. There's a whole story of Wikipedia scrubbing. Actually, Elon Musk shared it today. Scrubbing every reference to Jeffrey Epstein on Bill Clinton's Wikipedia page. So we know that it's a controlled sort of oppositional force. But it's also interesting that if you go and you look up this guy, Daskalakis, you find out that he was in charge of a response to men who have sex with men and the prevalence of monkeypox and or HIV in that population. And then I also found out there was a hyperlink to men who have sex with men. And yes, I'm a glutton for punishment, and I was a paramedic and a federal investigator. It's pretty hard to shock me, so I went ahead and clicked right through. And I found a couple of pictures of men, graphically kissing each other, which is not necessarily useful for Wikipedia, but so be it. But what I found out is that the term men who have sex with men, which is also abbreviated MSM, like mainstream media, just found that to be kind of clever, funny, and amusing. It doesn't mean that it has anything to do with their sexual orientation or the gender identity of the people doing so. I just want you to digest how detracted and how disconnected we've gotten from reality at least the people on the political left. They have absolutely left the farm. They are off the reservation. They are going down the bumpy dirt road of just whatever I want to believe is what I'm going to say. It has nothing to do with reality. They don't seem to really have any instinct to grip like the way normal people talk. Like if I were to say that man is gay to you, you may have feelings about it, but you at least would understand that I meant that he is at least attracted to men. A man attracted to men. It's not on Wikipedia anymore. It's been scrubbed. We've just gone down the road. It reminds me of something one of my buddies says, who's he's an FBI agent of all things. And he said, I don't look forward to like 2035 because we're just going to find out that a bunch of guys that used to be masculine are now swinging from the rafters with chicken feathers hanging out of their butts. That's kind of the absurdity level that I feel like we keep going down. And we are actually going to talk about Carter and Joe Biden. But let me first give you an example of why I think these people have lost it, or at least one sort of piece of evidence that shows me over and over again, they just can't get it together to figure out that normal Americans rejected this craziness. It is fringe. You do have a right to be weird in America. You have a right to be fringe. You have a right to do all of the strange things as long as you're two consenting adults and hopefully in the privacy of your own home. Most of us did not care. But you've made us start caring a little bit more. You've made us because we don't have any choice. We have to protect our kids from things that are not for kids. This is the reference I want to give you. MSNBC, my favorite. Fantastic. How Democrats can build a winning media message. And what they said is, underneath in the sub column here, you can't just create a liberal Joe Rogan out of thin air. Democrats need to step out of their bubbles much more often. I'm going to show you that this article written by MSNBC or posted on MSNBC's blog. It's under their opinion section. The person who wrote it is a person called Brian Rosenwald. It's the author of Talk Radio America, How an Industry Took Over the Political Party That Took Over the United States. I suppose that's interesting. They can't just create a liberal Joe Rogan, folks. And they're realizing that. Here's the really ridiculous part. Joe Rogan, hold it, is a liberal. And he was always a liberal. And he's still a liberal. He's just a reasonable person that also understands reality. So what you have is the problem with people on the hard left not accepting that liberal doesn't mean hard leftists. They thought that they could take their label and run it to mean whatever they want. And we were like, no, you're no longer liberal. You're illiberal. You're leftist because the curve goes upward to totalitarianism. You use the word democracy, but the word democracy simply means the tyranny of the majority. If you take one thing away from this program for the year, I would like you to take that away. Majority rule, democracy, is an enemy of the United States. And it was something that has been an enemy going all the way back to George Washington. Simply getting most people to agree with you does not make it right. And it certainly is not an American value, although it is being preached as one. Before I play you the loony clip of these people stepping into the bro culture / manosphere, yes, those are the real words they use, let's have a little reminder that majoritarianism, also known as democracy, is not American, and it's not an American value, and it never has been. A little throwback clip that we've played here before, but it's always worth a quick refresher and reminder.
Democracy is a form of government based upon the principle of majority rule, period. End of discussion. Now, that's not very complicated. Majority rule. It's easy to understand, easy to sell to the masses, and, I might add, deadly. For example, what would you call a lynch mob? That's majority rule. There's only one dissenting vote, and he's at the end of the rope. Now, that's pure democracy in action. But wait a minute, you say. The majority should rule, yes, but not to the extent of destroying the rights of the minority. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are no longer describing a democracy. We are speaking of a republic. A republic is a limited democracy. It's a form of government based upon the principle of limited majority rule. Limited so that the minority, even a minority of one, can be protected against the whims and passions of the majority. And how do you protect the minority from the majority? You write down a set of rules on a piece of paper. You say, this we can do, that we cannot. At the top of the paper, you write the word Constitution. And then everyone agrees to follow the rules no matter what the temptation. And when you're finished, you've created a constitutional republic.
And there it is. It's explained in less than 90 seconds to those who don't get it. And so I will post this today on our Locals program. You guys can throw it up on Locals. You'll if you want to go over there. It's KyleSeraphin.com. Again, these are all the places you can follow us. You're seeing them on the screen, on X, on YouTube if you're watching over there as well. Locals is always KyleSeraphin.com. Go over there, check it out. Make sure you share this episode on Spotify if you want to send it that way. You can do that as well. But the key is 90 seconds or less debunking the democracy line, which has been ubiquitous under Barack Obama. And it even creeps into some of the speaking of those on the political right, or at least those who should be on the political right. Donald Trump has said it as well. It's certainly something that I will never forget. Joe Biden standing in front of Independence Hall, shaking his fists with the red backlight, giving the red speech, talking about how half the country was evil and extremists and a bunch of emotional labels, because they're not interested in a constitutional republic. They're not interested in doing things as they were written on that little piece of paper. As G. Edward Griffin said, there's supposed to be a governing set of principles. And I think that we're going to find that Joe Biden's legacy is that he tried to flout that at every moment. And we got a little interview coming from the MSNBC folks. I will get to the brosphere and the manosphere. It's more cultural than it is anything else. But this is the mechanics of what's going on right now that we are currently missing. Because as Republicans are gearing up to take over the government on January, they're going to have January 5th and 6th. They're going to have all of our new, January 3rd they take over? Is it 3rd or 5th? It doesn't make a difference to me right now. In a couple days, the new Congress will be sworn in, and then they'll be able to swear in a new president. And of course, the administration's already made a bunch of nominations, and hopefully we can get them in sooner. What we're seeing is that they've also ceded a bunch of ground, because the op that we always talk about is thinking that you actually are going to be able to influence things much larger than you will. People think that Donald Trump being sworn in will be the solution. Nope, it's the beginning of the battle. And some of that battle is already lost. Here is the Washington bureau chief of whatever little outfit this is, a woman named April Ryan, talking about what the Biden administration has been doing in these closing last lame duck moments, stalking the courts, now overrunning, having more appointees than Donald Trump had in the federal court system, with a bunch of people that don't believe in that little piece of paper. They believe in activist judgment, because conservatism, which is to say reading the original text and what it meant at the time and interpreting law as written, in other words, respecting that there are three branches of government and they all have three independent duties. One is to write the laws and explain them what they are, put them in writing. The other one is to execute said laws and spend the money that is appropriated to do the enforcement of and the operation of those laws. And the last one is to play referee and decide what's fair and what's not fair. The problem is the left for years has been going after the judiciary and trying to make them also write laws and shade the edges in ways that they find more favorable. And that has been going on still. Donald Trump is going to have his work cut out ahead of him because of this. And it seems like ceded territory, because there could have been more obstructions. There could have been more filibuster. There could have been more attempts to sideline some of these judicial picks. But they've kind of walked off the field. And they're like, we'll just pick this up in January. So this is going to make 2025 harder. And you guys should at least know that going in, that this is not going to be a slam dunk and a walk-off. It's not a walk-off grand slam. We won. This is step one. This is the first pitch. And it was a take. So we're now behind in the count with 1 or 2 strikes on.
On this.
It's simple. This president, Joe Biden, did not want to give President-elect Donald Trump a chance to add more conservatism into our courts, bottom line. I mean, you have so many people talking about how everything is weighed down right now. The White House on January 20th at noon will be Republican. The House and the Senate, what? Republican, and the Supreme Court leans Republican. So this president wanted to ensure checks and balances. He is that standard bearer from what the founding fathers put in place. He wants checks and balances, and he wants to make sure everything goes well. And think about this. Even though it wasn't a federal judgeship, think about what happened with Merrick Garland. Think about the fact that Merrick Garland never got a chance to even have interviews with some senators. And because they rebuffed, they did not want to have a Democrat on the U.S. Supreme Court. And in some ways, this is that as well. This is trying to hold the line to make sure, once again, that fairness and equal play and checks and balances are in place.
There you go. It's about fairness, okay? It's about democracy. It's about democracy by not having democracy, because we don't like the idea that the people spoke. It's all about democracy right up until it doesn't serve our purposes. And then we're back to the thing that's authoritarian. Listen, authoritarianism is not the worst system, just so we're all clear, okay? There are plenty of examples of authoritarianism on smaller scales that you live in. If all my children vote to go to have pizza at night and my wife and I are cooking meat on the grill, guess who wins? It's not the majority. It's the authoritarian. It's us, because we get to say. Now, we're benevolent dictators in our house, as you probably were with your children, as you may be in your own household. Sometimes someone's got to draw the line. By the way, I found out yesterday that in the complaints that Steve Friend had about his wife buying a huge TV, that the TV was not the price that I thought. It was like 3 or 4 times more than that. Sometimes having an executive veto is not a bad thing, where you go, oh, $2,000 plus TV, maybe not today. That's probably not. It's too big for our house, and we don't need to spend that. That may be the right way to go, even if everybody agrees that it would be really fun to have a big 76-inch TV. I only bring that up because I went to Costco yesterday, and I stood in front of an 86-inch TV, and I took a picture and sent it to Steve. And I was like, it's only $1,000, man. I'm bringing it home. I'm taking up the wall. And he was like, dude, double or triple that. That's what was going on in my house. So yikes. Okay, listen, sometimes authoritarianism works. You have to go and say, no. We cut it off. The fun thing is that if you have principles that say, listen, this is the way that's written, and we understand that this is fair play, and so on, so be it. That's not the way it's been played in the last little bit here. And that's certainly not the way that Democrats like to see things go, because it really upsets them. It upsets them to lose because it's always been about power. It's never been about what is the historical norm in our quote unquote democracy, also known as the constitutional republic. And I do want to go and play you this, because this bro culture thing, this is them trying to do a liberal Joe Rogan, who was already a liberal. What they want is a leftist Joe Rogan. Let me play you a little taste of the discussions that are going on by decidedly unserious people. It's worth knowing that this is what they're talking about. By the way, this is really hard to listen to, so I've been kind of filibustering to get past it. I'm going to do it anyway. Here we go.
I heard from some of the, the very fancy political streets that bro culture was actually like taken. The term bro culture is to young men that Latinx is to the Hispanic and Latino community. I just want to throw that on the table. Is that true? Like, is the bro culture, is it a backlash? Let's talk about bro culture.
I mean, look, I certainly don't feel like I'm a part of a bro culture, but there is a manosphere, right? There's a manosphere where these conversations are happening, where there are conversations that are not happening in mainstream media, conversations about masculinity, about how masculinity is evolving. I get these texts from my dad in WhatsApp groups all the time about how what we are eating is reducing masculinity. I'm like,
that's factually true, by the way. The things that we're eating and what's going on. That's a great freeze frame I just did, too. That guy looks exactly like what I think about when I think about masculinity. I wonder if he has a Dimitri Daskalakis leather little outfit and pentagram underneath that suit. I really don't. That's not what I wonder about. But if your dad is saying, hey, man, men are not men anymore the way they used to be, what do we think has changed? I had an observation yesterday on social media talking about how many people are fat coming out of the grocery store. Maybe you're one of them. That's okay. I'm not judging that. I'm observing that people are fat and fatter than when I was young. In fact, to the point where the kid who was the quote unquote fat kid in the Goonies is like a normal kid today. I see him everywhere. And he was considered morbidly obese for the time when I was growing up. That is a change. It's not a good change. It doesn't look healthy. It doesn't look masculine. So shouldn't we be asking questions about the food? This guy throws it off like eating avocados the problem. If you were living on avocados and steak and eggs, you'd be fine. I'm quite certain of it. But if you're living on food-like products, it might be another discussion. And the idea that he said, we're not going to talk about bro culture, but there is a manosphere, said no masculine man ever. No one's ever said that. I have a lot of really masculine friends, like people who kill people for a living. That's an actual discussion. Kill people for a living. What does that look like? That means that you are a killer. You do it professionally. There are plenty of my friends that do that in various parts of the military. They go out and cause bad things to happen to people who need it so our country can continue to have the constitutional republic. Not one of them has ever used the expression manosphere. And honestly, the idea of bro culture to me just sounds like dudes tapping each other in the nuts when they walk by, which is something I experienced when I was enlisted. If you didn't have that, I'm sorry that you didn't. It's very funny. It's locker room culture. It's bro culture. It's dudes being dudes. It's boys being boys. It doesn't really matter what you call it. The fact that they're having this weird discussion about it, I want you to just say, non-masculine people talking about masculinity is not going to solve their problem. What they need to do is realize that there's honesty. And it's even funnier. The old guy who steps in and decides to weigh in on this in a second, he says the almost correct thing, which is that men, if they want to be men, know that the value of being a man is protecting women and children. It's actually not that complicated. This used to be a common virtue and value across left and right because it was like a Western human value. Because they have run away from Western principles, from Christian principles, from things that have basically always been there to guide Americans. Like I said, 2024's legacy is not even understanding what the word woman or gay mean anymore. We can't even agree on simple terms. So of course they're going to have this weird, useless discussion. They're going to continue to be irrelevant as long as they're having this. And honestly, I don't care. I'm here for it. I want it to happen. Hopefully we just don't get any more, Jimmy Carter / Joe Biden's out of it. Joe Biden's, my bad.
Like that, I promise it's not because I ate avocados, but that, you're right. So there is an environment where conversations are happening that Democrats are going to have to penetrate. But when we get there, we're going to have a different conversation. And some of these conversations are complicated, right? This is what we talk about, reclaiming values like masculinity and spirituality. What does masculinity look like in a Democratic Party? Right. What is the role of masculinity if it's not all toxic?
But it's not. See, that's the problem. So I think you just jumped onto a false narrative. It's not about what masculinity is in a political party. It's what's masculinity in our culture.
In society. That's right.
What does it mean for a young man to grow into a father, to grow into a productive member of our community? So this whole bro culture BS is this psychological warp game with young men telling them that they got to, have a particular attitude about women. They got to look at situations, through this lens where, Josh Hawley and others, hey, we're going to shine some light on our groin and we're going to become more men. What the hell are we talking about here?
One thing I found interesting in our research is we asked young men, what does it mean to be a man? Number one thing was protecting your family. Number two thing was honesty. So this is a complicated group. There's 25 million young.
It's actually not very complicated. 25 million young people in this country. And if you were to get it down to it, it's so simple. Protecting your family, being an honest person, being a man simply means telling the truth, being honest. And then in a society that doesn't like that, sometimes there's consequences. That's the last part of it, that it costs you something, that your integrity has some value. That's why you guys like Garrett O'Poyle. That's why you like Steve Friend. That's probably why you listen to this program. It's like some things cost you something. And it is about God and family. It is about having certain principles. It is about actually understanding that the rules were there and we were supposed to live by them. In any case, how fun, huh? What a weird thing for them to be talking about at this time. I don't know how else to say it. I just find it very comical that they are trying to discuss something that is so clear and obvious to those of us that are looking on the outside. We're like, hey, just keep figuring it out all you want. We'll keep winning. Because a regular group of Americans, like liberal Joe Rogan, who is a liberal, also understands this because he doesn't have like such far out there and weirdo values. All right. Speaking of good values, my friends over here at Patriot Coolers, I want to plug them one more time as we end the year. I think we're going to try to do like a giveaway like once every month or once every 60 days because I really liked seeing you all getting them. It also made me buy more Patriot Coolers, go figure. And I do spend my own money. PatriotCoolers.com, promo code KYLE. It's KYLE. KYLE saves you 10%. You guys can do that over at the website. If you look in the show description or in the show notes, you will in fact find that we have a Kyle Seraphin collection. This is not in it, it turns out. I just always wanted one. My buddy Phil Kennedy had one of these in wood grain, and I just thought it looked really good in the studio. It's almost the exact same color as what's going on behind me. Wood grain, if you guys are into it, 20 ounce, 30 ounce, 40 ounce tumblers. They've got a 20 quart, I guess, and a 50 quart cooler, the hard cooler. And after I saw the small one, it made me want that too. Fantastic if you guys cart home groceries in a hot area. It's still 85 degrees in Texas, America right now. So we had to put stuff like that. And we didn't have it yesterday as we went to Costco. So I had to hope that my meats were going to make it home without spoiling. You guys don't have to hope like that. If you get your own, get your Patriot Cooler at patriotcoolers.com. It says Patriot right on them. Really a really good looking product. Every time I see it, I'm like, dude, I should own more of those. And I was like, I probably already own all of the stuff they have, including going all the way back to 2017 and their Gen 1 stuff. So for whatever that's worth. All right, let's do the comparisons. Because as I said, they're trying to push this Jimmy Carter thing. It's funny to see them try to say that Donald Trump is going to have the same problems that Jimmy Carter had. What they actually are kind of saying in these articles here, this is Stephen Collinson doing his analysis, which is always funny and amusing to me, is that essentially Jimmy Carter dicked up the country in such a way, I don't know any other way to say it, I know that's not very nice. He screwed up the country in such a way that we basically had to dig ourselves out of a hole for a while. And Joe Biden did the same exact damn thing. Donald Trump once called Jimmy Carter a quote-unquote nice man, but a terrible president. Now they are trying to whitewash and get rid of the terrible president part. The president-elect, speaking in 2019, was adopting a dominant narrative about Jimmy Carter that took root after he reinvented the concept of the post-presidency with his Nobel Peace Prize winning global humanitarianism, peacemaking, and democracy promotion. There's that word. It's always about the democracy promotion. There's an element of truth to all caricatures, and tributes to Carter, who died at 100 years old and looked like a skeleton on Sunday, tend to emphasize his post-White House legacy rather than his troubled spell behind the Oval Office, which was in fact short-lived, in the same way as Joe Biden. Carter's policies in energy, deregulation of the airline and the trucking industries and businesses had more lasting impacts than his mere 4 years in office might suggest. And while Ronald Reagan gets credit for winning the Cold War, they're going to say this, Carter made strategic investments in a new generation of weaponry that put his successor in a position of strength and showed the Soviet Union that it could never prevail. I guess he did that also by projecting strength in Iran, where we basically completely failed. Reagan faced down the evil empire. Carter showed an often forgotten ruthless streak by boycotting the 1980 Olympics in Moscow, protest to the Kremlin's invasion of Afghanistan. Okay. Despite the depth of experience on the global stage and achievements that endure today in the Middle East and Asia and the Western Hemisphere, there are important lessons and opportunities that his 21st century successors, starting with Donald Trump in his second term, can handle. Well, basically no to all that. No, that's incorrect. It's not true. Yes, he did get involved and meddle in a lot of places. Yes, he was an actual failure. Yes, Americans who remember that age all have almost universally negative thoughts about him. People who have come out of the woodwork that I've seen said, I remember that when he was governor, and then like if we had a family member saying that if he stepped into the White House, this country would be screwed. And for a while, it was a pretty bad situation. They've got all these sort of like attempts to whitewash here in this article showing how he was working on Middle East peace accords, the trilateral meetings between Egypt and Israel and the United States and blah, 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 and the Camp David Accord signed in 1978. And then anything they can do, anything. The reason I know that they're drawing a one-to-one and the media feels like they have to carry this water is because of this. Joe Biden is closing the government on January the 9th. It's going to be a federal holiday, at least for federal workers. And Jimmy Carter will lay in state. Now, laying in state, that's no big deal. That's fine. That should happen. I'm former leader of this country. We respect our former leaders. We respect the office, and that's why we put them there. But the executive order is closing all executive departments and agencies on January the 9th. The closure, which Joe Biden says is a mark of respect for the 39th president, will be effect on the day of the funeral, and he'll lay in state in the rotunda at the United States Capitol. This is a fairly common thing. The flags will fly at half staff for the next 30 days. I call on the American people to assemble on that day in their respective places of worship to pay homage to the memory of President James Earl Carter Jr. He wrote in a statement, because he can't speak anymore because Joe Biden is too old to actually make any bit of sense. I invite the people of the world to share our grief and join us in this solemn observation and observance. He was 100. If you live to 100, you win the victory. He didn't look like he was having the last couple good years. I've seen people do quite better. But at the end of the day, there's no sadness for someone making it to 100 years old, I don't think. How many people didn't get anywhere close? How many of those people didn't get close because of disastrous policies of Democrats? A lot, it turns out. I think, as I said, CNN intermittently putting weird people like Daskalakis up, and Scott Jennings, who continues to be this sort of voice of sanity. He summed it all up in a way that we can all hear in a very short clip, and I will enjoy this. He just described the presidency of Jimmy Carter just so.
He was a terrible president. That's why he lost in a landslide.
That's all I want to do. No, I'll play more of it.
He was a terrible president. That's why he lost in a landslide after his one term. And if it's possible, I think he was even a worse ex-president because of his meddling in U.S. foreign policy, because of his saddling up to dictators around the world, because of his vehement views, anti-Israel views, and more than dabbling in anti-Semitism over the years. He often vexed Democrats. Obama didn't even have him speak at his 2008 convention. He put Bill Clinton in a terrible foreign policy box on a North Korea nuclear issue. I think he was a guy who had a huge ego and believed that he was uniquely positioned to do all these things, even after the American people had roundly and soundly rejected his leadership. So I respect people who run for president and get elected president, but in his particular case, I think he time and again proved why he was never suited for the office in the first place.
They don't know how to take, they push back, but they actually ended up tending to agree. Here's how I know more of the whitewash is on, and this is why I said the media is complicit, and they are also all in to be able to back this up. This is a puff piece written 2 days ago at NPR. Jimmy Carter had an early ally in the Senate, a young Democrat named Joe Biden. You see? And there they are conspiring, talking in February of 1978 with Jimmy Carter lending an ear to a guy who was a pretty competent liar and thought about as much of himself as it seemed like Jimmy Carter did. Had a very inflated sense. I love the idea of saying that the problem that Jimmy Carter, it didn't just end when he got out of the White House. It's that he stepped into the space that most presidents previously walked away or they died. You know, we had that sort as well. But they used to walk away and say, I did my thing. I did my time. It is now an opportunity for the next person to step in without me meddling in world affairs. And Jimmy Carter kind of revolutionized that. He made it a thing that we saw Bill Clinton get involved, Hillary Clinton by extension as well. Barack Obama is very similar. Like, if you notice, like, Bush Jr. and Sr. stepped away from politics, at least. How interesting, though, that these guys couldn't. It does speak to the ego in a big way. And in addition to this little piece there, this is also kind of funny. Again, another link. I think this one is coming from, what is this, ABC maybe? No, this one's from BBC. The BBC also making the link that there is the problems that Carter had were the problems that Biden had, that they basically both did the same thing. Again, this is my supposition. Joe Biden aspired to be FDR in the way that he was able to fundamentally change the way our government interacts with the American people. And instead, he was a one-term failure that got blown out so bad he didn't even get the chance to sit there and sit for the election. He didn't even go out there and see whether or not the polls would reflect the same problem. Actually, I think his surrogate, who was nominally better and had somewhat better enthusiasm behind her, all astroturfed, I think, at the end, but was roundly rejected on both fronts. I said it the other day on X, and it's one of the fun things you can do out there is say pithy things. But Donald Trump beat the two top Democrats that are in the game right now. The best that they could field, apparently. Joe Biden, he beat him in the race, and then they put in a tap-in, tagged in the successor, and he beat Kamala Harris as well. Now, I'll go back and admit again, I didn't think we were going to have an election, mostly because I expected that that would be the case, that Americans would reject terrible policy, objectively bad stuff, and weak leadership, where they undermined all of our authorities, all of our institutions that we used to be able to take for granted, where we could look at them and go, oh, well, they're at least telling us the truth. So now what do we do with this information? We can't even do that anymore, which is why stories like this are so funny to me. This is coming from ABC. The United States is poised to see a dramatic drop in homicides for the third straight year. Fewer than 5,000 homicides were recorded. Sorry, more than 5,000 fewer homicides. We had a big spike in 2020, for whatever it's worth, at the end of the pandemic, under Democrat insanity. Locally, homicides are not a national thing, but they are trying to paint this like it's going to be part of Joe Biden's legacy, right? They want to act like he did some good things. In fact, one of the funniest little pieces was there are all kinds of things going on. If you look over at NBC, I think they actually have this. Let's see here. One piece of good news, that Donald Trump will not claim credit for. And it's this homicide rating, which has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It actually is not a federal problem. Murder, homicide, is not a federal crime, except in very narrow circumstances. Donald Trump's about to become the president again, says MSNBC News. And there's plenty of good news that he can take undeserved credit for. Unemployment is low. Inflation is down. Gas is cheap. It's getting cheaper. The stock market is booming. And long before Donald Trump is in office, but he will probably take credit. What he will not do is take responsibility or even claim responsibility for crime, especially homicides, being dramatically down from the spike that occurred during the worst of the pandemic in 2020. And the reasons he won't do it is because he uses fear to set Americans apart and try to act. Here's the problem. I don't believe those stats. You know why? They're being reported by the FBI, who fudged the numbers more than once. The jobs departments have fudged the numbers. All of our economic indicators have been fudged at one time or another under Joe Biden. So we can't even look at these and go like, well, at least we keep our crime stats correct. We don't believe that. We know that there was massive underreporting. We know that they've revised back and they actually went up in 2023. But the original numbers looked good. These people have always been about puff and about the news story, the cycle, and then hoping that nobody will ever fact check them or keep an eye out on it. And they said it right here. This is really funny. Boston only recorded 24 homicides in all of 2024. Its fewest number since 1957. Okay, great. Congratulations. Only 24 people were murdered on your watch. They are literally saying it's a 30-year low in violent crime in Washington, D.C. It's not the experience that people who live in Washington, D.C. have. So I wonder how little they are reporting it. They also said that the murder rate in New York City was low. It was like 357 homicides in New York City. I can't find the number in here, but whoa, only 357? Like what? What are we talking about here? That's a victory? Meanwhile, places like Austin, which is a growing city, have had more homicides than they can handle. They just had a guy that was released. I actually saw this yesterday. Had a guy that was released, multiple felony arrests, theft, larceny, etc., all felony level, all knocked down to misdemeanors. Now he's being tried for murder because he just murdered somebody. Because it turns out if you let criminals out for a long time, it's one thing to say that there are not that many crimes happening. It's another thing to say that you haven't made the arrest. And almost all of these things are fudged because they're going on arrest data. It's how many people were actually arrested and or convicted. It's not the number of crimes that were reported or that the police decided were not the thing that was claimed. That's where it gets really problematic. We don't believe the sources anymore. And that will be a legacy of Joe Biden. Last little piece here is this sort of ugly instinct to wish against the goodwill or wish against people. This is another little piece that I thought was kind of funny. Why it's hard to have Schadenfreude for Trump voters. I hate that term, by the way. I absolutely despise it, but there's a picture of it. Essentially, it's a German term that means the joy in saying "I told you so." If we want to do it really simple, right? It's a gloating sort of instinct. It's really gross too, by the way. Schadenfreude. George Hill says it to me a lot. He sort of is a "I told you so" kind of guy. That won't shock any of you. He has kind of a little bit of a bitterness to things when they go wrongly. But essentially, the claim here is that it's going to be really hard to be excited about Donald Trump smashing the people that supported him with policies that end up going after them. I remember this going back to the 90s. It was always like, how are you so dumb as to vote for people that are going to enact policies that do not favor you. The story they highlight here is an illegal immigrant whose family voted for Donald Trump because they don't believe that he'll be deported. They're probably correct, by the way. The story of people who depend on government benefits because they're a bunch of poor, useless people in Pennsylvania. So say at the Washington Post, that's their take on it. These poor, useless people who are on government subsidies, but also voted for Donald Trump. The reason you vote for someone that seems like they're going to bring about something better in the country is because you have a thing called hope, that you have a thing called optimism, that you have this sort of American value that even though I am not wealthy now, even though I may be in a financial straitjacket, my hope is, my belief is that my hard work and the American fairness will allow me to raise out of it. That's the big piece. It's an American virtue to look forward and say, I see what can be. If you ever look at the discussions between like the people that are in Britain, the people that are in New England, right? So the next version of Britain, and then the people that made it across, at least historically. I don't think today is a good example, but historically in the United States, the most hopeful and optimistic people continued to move westward. The people that were the least capable, the most cynical folks, they just stayed in Britain. You're never going to make it across the sea. You're probably going to die trying. Maybe so. And those people stayed in the old world, whether it be in Spain, whether it be in Italy, whether it be in France, whether it be in Germany or Britain. All those people, right? But then you had a group of people that came in with hope, and they said, I'm going to take a journey over to the United States. This is like the story of immigration in the United States that at least shared a common value. The most hopeful and optimistic people, they moved here. Why? Opportunity. Not success, by the way. Opportunity. They had an opportunity to come and be successful. And it wasn't because of the government. It was because they might die trying, but at least they were going to have an opportunity where the throttle was lifted and the governor was not on, and they were able to maybe achieve their top speed. And the people that stayed on the East Coast were the least hopeful of those folks. That's kind of the way it's worked out. And if you look, that's why it's bastions of leftism, I think. That's why it's so blue in some of those places. The places where the American Revolution kicked off, where they should be nurturing and fostering that legacy of revolution, it's the opposite of it, because the people that had the opportunity, the means, the motive, or the drive, they continued on. And some of them died on that Oregon Trail, and some of them died on the way out to Texas or New Mexico. Some of them stayed in Texas. Some of them continued on to California. And so if you look back in time, not today, but if you go back a couple of generations ago, the further west people moved, the more hopeful and optimistic, and their architecture reflected it, and their culture and their cities, and they were tolerant. Now it's gone to the point where it's too tolerant. It's gone too far. They've been captured by this sort of democracy, this tyranny idea. But it's interesting because the left wants to try to redefine masculinity. They want to try to redefine and figure out, how did we lose this? It's because you went around the bend. You went from liberalism, which is not in and of itself horrific. I think it's actually a good contrast to us. We need someone to challenge our ideas. We need to be able to defend our ideas. And they went into leftism, which is like authoritarian bad things. It's telling everyone that you're awful. So we're going to end with kind of a last little kind of piece here. I will give you some humor to shut it all down. But here's the reason. This is the real legacy of the Joe Biden era. And it should have ended 25 years ago. It should have ended long before it ever got to us. This is just a reminder to me, because I keep these clips on hand, that for whatever you want to say, he's never going to be FDR. He was always more like Jimmy Carter, and he actually probably should have never even been in the position to be a Jimmy Carter. These are little compilations of Joe Biden historically. He was always bad. He never belonged in this space. We've left that meritocracy thing, and we've gone into like just complete, plutocracy, if you will. Plutocratic. People who had money and access to sell, so they did. Here's this guy.
Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania don't come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
there was no platform upon which they could stand.
He was always a liar. He was always terrible. And on top of that, he actually really hated Americans. This is my last little piece that I will always remember: why we will not give up our guns, why we will not give up our God, why we will not give up our civil liberties for majority rule. This is Biden saying you need an F-16. Let's not forget this guy, because this is going to be something we're not going to have the same focus for the next 4 years. Some of us need to remain vigilant about this kind of tyrannical democracy, majoritarianism.
Ban the number of bullets that can go in a magazine. There's no need for any of that. I love my right-wing friends who talk about the tree of liberty is water with the blood of patriots. If you need to work about taking on the federal government, you need some F-15s. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it.
And I might add, the Second Amendment from the day it was passed limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of patriots, and all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that there's always been the ability to rationally limit the type of weapon that can be owned and who can own it.
There's more and more of these. I'm going to throw them up on Locals. You guys wanted to see that clip. It's much longer from 1988. It's much longer from most recently. The things that he had to say were always terrible. He stumbled through it, and we've been watching this in a way that it was almost unbelievable. This last generation, it's my generation, and maybe the one behind me, have been some of the first to vote away their own civil liberties at an incredible rate. They don't want freedom. It's not that they don't want to participate in that freedom. They don't want it for anybody. And Joe Biden has been sort of like the poster boy of that. I feel like he's simply an empty vessel that got filled up with it. Here is how empty he was. This is the reason why the press has to whitewash Jimmy Carter. My last final argument is because they spent the last couple years pretending Joe Biden was someone he wasn't. So why would they not do the same thing for Jimmy Carter? Because Joe Biden was going to end up in that same trash heap of terrible legacies presidents. This is the last little piece here. Let's just do a little compilation of them trying to pretend he's someone that he wasn't in real time. Now they're going to have to do it as he gets ready to shuffle off this mortal coil.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2024?
Don, you're asking me this question. Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. I can't even keep up with it.
The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
I can testify because I've been working very closely with this president for the past 2 years. I've been knowing him for 30 years. And I'm telling you, this guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game.
Joe Biden has vision. He has knowledge. He has a strategic thinker.
The president is focused. He's detail-oriented. He's always thinking about the big picture.
He is engaging. He is capable. He has an incredible record as president.
And I'm often with him on foreign trips. He's at the top of his game.
So he has a vision. He has knowledge. He has judgment. He has a strategic thinking.
I met with the president, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and he seemed fine to me.
I have complete confidence in the president. I have watched him expertly guide meetings of staff and cabinet members. I could not have more confidence in the president.
I would just tell you that I meet frequently with the president, and every single time I meet with him, he is just fine.
But he is, knowledgeable, wise.
Incredibly sharp, incredibly probing, incredible command of the details.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
There is nothing to these challenges, these suggestions that somehow he's not sharp and he's not capable.
We see Joe Biden up close. We know how attuned he is to the issue.
And you're going to see how smart he is and the experience he has.
I say his age is an asset.
Aha!
He's wise.
Yes, he's wise. He has wisdom. He has experience.
And his experience, because of his age and his wisdom, has been invaluable to this country.
A lot of...
It goes on. Jamie Raskin's where I draw the line. I just can't listen to him with the do-rag on. He looks so ridiculous. Anyway, that was the legacy. The legacy was defending it in real time. We got to watch them do it. They debased themselves on this altar of ridiculousness. They're doing the same thing with Jimmy Carter right now because they're going to have to do this again in a couple years when Joe Biden finally kicks it. That's what's going to happen next. That's why they're doing it right now. That's my take on it. Again, he wanted to be transformational, and he ended up just being barely transitional. This horrible moment in between a Donald Trump and a Donald Trump. So be it. We'll take it. I'm going to end with something kind of funny. This is probably the closet conservatives, the slightly red-pilled radicals that are working in the White House today are the number 3 guy in this video. Folks, it's never about the money. Just remember, this is one of those little funny little office pranks. I'm sure this is staged, but I find it clever.
Brian, push this button, a coworker dies, but you get $100.
I can't do it, man.
No, you're too good. Hey, Shante.
Yeah.
Push this button and a coworker dies, but you get $100.
Okay, do I get to pick the coworker?
Nope.
No, man, I don't have to pass.
Nah, you're a good dude. Hey, Dave, push this button and a coworker dies. You didn't let me finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was supposed to be push this button and a coworker dies, but you get $100. Wow, I guess I owe you $100.
It's never about the money.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah.
Give the button. The button.
Nope.
Hopefully that guy works in government. That needs to be the Donald Trump attitude coming in starting in January. Maybe not the dying part, that we don't need to be that morbid about it, but some jobs need to go away for sure. I hope that's the case. It's been a lot of buildup in the last few years. Work's cut out there, folks. It's out there. All right. I will wish you a very happy new year. We're going to take off the day tomorrow and probably the day after that to spend some time with the kiddos and welcome in the new year. Just reiterating my sincere thanks for all of you being here and sharing this program and getting after it with supporting us on every way that you have. It's been a world-changing and really paradigm-changing shift for me to be able to look out there. And I didn't know that I liked this. I didn't know that I wanted this. I was more than happy to never have anyone know my name. What I like doing is knowing that we get to interact every morning. I get to watch you in the chat. I get to watch you guys think about things. I get to push you in ways that you don't agree with, and you let me know. And we're going to do something that I think in the most important way is redefine what this social media crap is, where everybody just says crappy things to each other. This chat that we have here, let me put them on the screen here. Let me put you guys up on the screen. This chat that we have that runs every morning with us, and I highly encourage you, if you've never been part of our live show up at 0930 on Eastern Time. It's 8:30 in Texas. Come and join us on Rumble. Come and join us, either that or even on X. You can do the same thing. Look, there's more. I'll show you the other chat here. That's the rest of the chat that's hanging out over on YouTube and on X. Come in and interact with people, disagree politely. It's the thing that's missing. It's this sort of either you're with us or you're evil attitude. That is not the audience of this show. We are critical thinkers. You are critical thinkers. And you have that nuanced ability to say, you're challenging me, but you're not telling me I'm bad. You're not attacking the person. You're just attacking an idea. And maybe we should all try to test those things in a good way. So thanks so much for being part of this. I'm deeply grateful, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the new year. We'll come back in on, what is it? We'll come back in on Thursday, I guess. Let me see what I wrote down. Yep, Thursday. Is that right? No, Friday. We're going to come back in on Friday, and we're going to play ball with you guys there. Have a wonderful New Year's Eve. I hope it's prayerful and reflective. I hope that you're safe, no firework injuries, and God bless you. See you on the other side in 2025.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.